Welcome to Season 5 of the Long-Winded One Podcast. Listen as we showcase original work from top Royal Road authors read by professional voice actors. Hear interviews from your favorite LitRPG and game-lit authors. Lastly, listen as the Long-Winded One tries his hand at his first ever LitRPG novel, The Four Treasures.
Welcome back to another episode of the Long-Winded One Podcast. We're interviewing in the morning because one of my guests is from Germany. Hello. So I have two podcasters with me today, Max from the CritRPG podcast and Dakota from the UpperPen Podcast. So welcome you guys.
Yeah, hello.
Hello.
And this is going to be such a treat. I love interviewing authors and narrators, whether they're, big names or just people getting started on Royal Road. But so much of what we do is prompting somebody and then shutting up. and this is going to be a great time for you to talk about your experiences on your podcast and to talk about the genre. And I know some people would argue that LitRPG is not a genre, not a subgenre, but to talk about the stuff that we love. The first question is, how did you discover progression fantasy / LitRPG / game lit?
So I actually didn't know about it for a long time. I read very much like classic literature and a lot of nonfiction. And then my husband was listening to Eric Ueglen's The Bad Guy or The Good Guys. And he's like, dude, you got to listen to this. It's hilarious. And so I was very resistant. I was like, no, man, like it's probably not written very well. I'm not into it. And then he just played it while I was in the room and I was like hooked.
I know what you're saying, right? Like if you're used to like high fantasy or something like that, and you come into progression fantasy, LitRPG, things that are a little more light, it might at first be a shock to the system. But what was it that turned you on about the Good Guys series?
So it was like Mr. Paul being ridiculous, and I loved the narrator who just like made everything bigger and wonderful.
Neil's like a classically trained actor, and he has, for Glatton, he's like, which is not how Eric wanted to pronounce that, Glatton, right? But Neil was like, well, if you're from the city, then you pronounce it this way, and if you're not from the city, then you pronounce it this way. I'm like, wow, like a lot of thought goes into that.
I think Eric Ueglen also ran into some copyright issues with some of the names he had, so Neil had to kind of wiggle around that.
Like the Ghostbusters reference?
Yeah. So there was a few names of the cities that were close enough to others that they had to tweak how they said it.
Well, what about you, Max? How'd you get into the world?
Well, it started with when my mom and my dad loved each other a lot. No.
You take it, you're very literal. Okay. I have to remember this for future questions.
It's called LitRPG, the literal. No, like, first off, I want to say that I don't know who you're talking to and that they're all wrong, about LitRPG. No, but my story is perhaps a little bit more depressing because I was really depressed when I started reading LitRPG. So I got into sufficiently advanced magic like a long time back. And it was Amazon, and I didn't get it. I read it, and at the time I was reading I think it just came off of like the Name of the Wind or the Wise Man's Fear, and then I started reading that, and I was like, what is this drivel? Like I was an arrogant asshole. Pardon if I'm swearing.
A snob, right? A snob.
Yes. I was an arrogant snob for the edit. And I didn't really interact with it anymore because it wasn't a genre back then, because it is a genre. But then a couple of years later, in 2021 actually, like a couple of things happened in succession. I got into like a really tough breakup and lost my job at the same time. And yeah, that was just like this real big downward spiral that got me into like a burnout. And I made the decision to just go do something for myself, like treat myself. And I went to Modena, Italy, where I spent 2 weeks just walking around and doing nothing. And I thought to myself, hey, if I have a bike there and I'm biking around, how about I just get some like good headphones that I can use on the bike? Aeropex by Aftershocks, by the way, really good. And listen to some audiobooks.
The sponsor for this episode, by the way, yeah. So
that's very good. Yeah, I didn't know that. But are they though?
No.
I wish it would sponsor me. No, but so I looked at Amazon and I was looking at Audible, like, hey, what's the longest book I can get? Because I wanted something like, Name of the Wind, not Name of the Wind, The Way of Kings, and I thought to myself, like, hey, like this book here it's called He Who Fights with Monsters. It sounds funny. I'm going to read that. And then basically I had Heath Miller, like assuaging my anxiety for like 2 weeks straight because there's so long books. I listened to the first two and the third one just came out at that time. So I got that while I was still in Italy and like downloaded it over like crappy public Wi-Fi. And listened to like Jason's adventures while I was like riding my bike through the Italian countryside. Very, very cool stuff. That's how I got into it.
Yeah, well, once you go LitRPG, it's really hard to go back. I find it's like in college I got into this Kurt Vonnegut stage, right? So I went Kurt Vonnegut and Douglas Adams, and then I was like, well, I like satire, so maybe I should give George Orwell a try. You just can't go that. You can't do that, right? Like you can't go that direction. And I feel like it may be hard to break into LitRPG, but once you're there, everything else seems so stuffy.
It truly is the Hotel California of genres. You can join, but you can never leave.
I really do think that the like best thing to ever happen to LitRPG is the narrators, because they've enlivened it so much, if that makes sense. And it's just easier for people to jump into something where Jeff Hayes is making a really weird voice and
or Travis Baldry is narrating a masturbatory seal. Yeah.
Yeah, there's been some really uncomfortable scenes, but yeah.
You mispronounced funny. I'm kidding.
So we know how you got into the genre, but like, where did you make the leap to podcasting? How did you do that?
So I was at the beginning of a burnout, another one. And I went to the spa. Just like a spa, like I took a day off of work, like randomly in the middle of the week, and I just went to the spa and like took some books with me. I was like, I need to like relax. And while I was there, I finished Big Sneaky Barbarian. And I had this other book that I'm not going to name because I didn't like it all that much. But I read it and I was like, hey, this book isn't all that good. My friends who I had formed a writing group with by then, they have way better books. And I just kind of wish people would know about them more. So I should do a Reddit thread. And I wrote that down on a little card. And I was like, hey, why doesn't anyone have a podcast about these people? I should do a podcast. Just like the cat and the meme, like I should buy a boat. I was literally like that. And then I went home and I asked my good friend Host, and Host said, no, never. And I asked my other good friend Heiliger, and he was like, sure, mate, whatever. So that was that.
Well, Dakota, how did you get into the world of podcasting?
So I was actually at school. I went to a Masters of Fine Arts program for creative writing. And one of the things that they did there was they would have authors come and talk to us. And then they also had this radio show where the students in the program interviewed authors, and we played it on air. So I was doing that for a few years before I started my podcast, UpperPen. And I just really wanted to talk to authors that I didn't think would go over so well on Minnesota Public Radio. So I don't know. I finally had all these contacts in the publishing, like publicist world. So I felt like I could reach out to people easily. And then what happens is I usually end up getting kind of depressed in like the winter. So I take a long break, and it forms these seasons of my show.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. This is not the depression podcast.
No, but it is.
Can I ask both of you, who were your inaugural interviews?
Haylock.
Okay.
Who's the best?
For LitRPG, Dakota Kraut. Yeah.
Oh. Wow. That was your first interview?
Well, first LitRPG interview, I believe. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And then, so he was actually very happy to talk. So I think people are very intimidated by authors, or like they just don't know how to reach out. But he wanted to talk because he had started Mountaindale Press. And so he needed all the attention he could get, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also found that like authors like to talk a lot about their books, which is not it's not a dig. I'm including myself in this. It's a very easy podcasting space to be in because I've only ever gotten 2 people who said no.
Yeah. Same. And it's, you know, what's interesting is the more people you interview, the easier reaching out and, you know, confirming people becomes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, you know, when you're first getting started, it's like, who are you? Yeah. Well, okay. So next question then would be for both of you. How do you choose the people that you invite on your show?
It's who I read. It's literally, if I'm in their book, I am probably going to talk to them or try to reach out. But that's it.
I'm with you, Dakota. I feel like I got to know. I'm happy to discuss the person, like you said, Max, because I think the listeners want to get to know the person and what sort of feeds the story. But for me, I got to read the story too.
I think that's why I have. So like, I really like the video format of the podcast because people can see the person. They can like, I don't know. It gives more of the author, and then sometimes what we're discussing leads into very ridiculous things. But
how do you handle it when people come in and don't want to be seen?
I've only had one person, and we didn't do the interview, which is kind of sad. I was thinking about trying to do like not an animated thing, but like maybe some pictures thrown up on the screen, but it just didn't work how I wanted. So we just didn't do the interview. Yeah.
I like using, there's this free PNG tuber program where it's basically 2 pictures that alternate based on when you're speaking or not. And I made the mistake of giving that to Casual Farmer. And now like there's like this abomination out there, which is like a gigantic chicken that like looks like it's being choked as it speaks. But yeah, like Casual has been great for the show.
That's really funny. What is the name of the program?
It's called VidoTube. I'm gonna send you guys, and if there's a chat in here, there is. I'm gonna send you guys a link.
All right. Well, while you're looking up that and putting it in the chat, I want to know like how you prepare for the episodes. It sounds like Dakota reads the books. Max, it sounds like maybe you get to know the person a little bit on chat before. But are there other ways that you prepare for your interviews?
I take a shower sometimes.
That's helpful.
Those are important for the in-person interviews.
So if the author asks, or if the narrator asks, hey, what kind of questions are you going to ask? So like Nick Podell is a good example. He was really, really reluctant to talk to me because he'd done a podcast before and all they wanted to talk about was, who do you think would win in a fight, Batman or Superman? You know?
Wow.
And he's like, I I would love to talk to you about my work and how I prepare for that, but I'm not okay with like dumb questions. And so usually I'm just like, well, we talk about how you prepare, what you do, like how do you keep track of voices, things like that. But I don't give them specific questions, or I try really hard not to.
Have you encountered anybody who wanted that list ahead of time?
So more traditionally published authors, their publicists always ask for a list. And so what I do is when I email them back, I'm just like, well, we talk about this and this and this and this and this. And usually that mollifies them. But if they ask for a specific list, then I'll write something up and mostly follow it. But there's always the caveat of, dude, we're having a conversation. Like,
yeah,
things go off the rails quickly.
My facetious answer aside, I also I have 5 questions. They're the same for every single podcast because I designed them to be like kind of global. In my day job where I'm an agile coach, so that's kind of like a mediator and like a organizational designer. It's really hard to explain. But one of the things that I do is I try to establish a leadership style with management where it's less about telling people what to do and more about letting people, find a solution for the problems that we're facing. And one of the techniques for that is something called clean language, where you try to not put yourself into the questions that you're asking, right? So you don't asking, why do you think we should be doing this or this? Because that's already a binary decision. Maybe answer C would have been right? But now we're already thinking in binaries, and that narrows it down. So what I'm trying to do with these questions is to leave them as open as possible so people can be themselves. That works sometimes better, sometimes less good.
What's funny, Max, is your profession and my profession are completely different. I work with children, so
no, that's not different.
No, it totally is. You give kids 2 options, 2 acceptable options. That's what you do. They're binary.
So it's funny because my whole like educational career was very much. It felt like if you didn't know the answer to something or you didn't know something before the class started, it was very unacceptable. Mm-hmm. And now that I'm not in education, I'm like, well, how the fuck would I know these things? Sorry.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
Like, I'm literally going to school for this. And like, I want to learn how to think outside the box and how to come to realizations on my own. So it's very funny that like,
can you think outside the box? Yes, no, right?
No, I can't.
Yeah.
Anyway, we could definitely talk about this for a long time, but I want to keep us focused on what probably people came to listen about. So I want to know about your community, right? How has the reception been from your listeners, and then where do you interact with your community, right? Is it Reddit? Is it Discord? Is it?
You guys have listeners? I'm just screaming into the void. No,
yeah.
Aren't we all?
You go ahead first.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. No, you go ahead. I have a small Discord, and people chat there. But I think my community is still kind of small, mostly because I didn't have much time to really engage with it all that much, and it's a bit sad on it. But I have to admit, I'm doing this podcast mostly for myself, not because of the money. As you guys know, like podcasts don't earn money.
I totally understand. Yes,
but it's just like I really just want to hang out with cool people and like authors and want to talk to them. Like that's why I'm doing this. And more authors are joining my Discord. I'm talking there, which is amazing. But I'm not in this to create a huge community. I'm as extroverted as I am. I'm actually very much of a person of small circles. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
So I always feel like an interloper. In every situation where I'm trying to communicate or talk with people in the LitRPG community, because it just seems so strange. Like I feel like I'm on the outside trying to look in, which might not be everybody's perspective, but again, like I have depression and anxiety, so I'm always worried about these things. Mm-hmm. And it's very difficult sometimes to keep producing content when it feels like I'm not benefiting the author or the narrator by having a lot of views, which is probably not a healthy way of looking at the podcast, because I just love talking to people. I really love having conversations with people who enjoy literature. And I just this is my book club, basically. Yeah. So I find it very difficult to feel like I'm actually in the community, which is like imposter syndrome, and it's sometimes going away. But then I went to Dragon Con in Atlanta, where they have this big LitRPG thing. And I felt so much like an interloper. I felt very much imposter syndrome, even though I'd talked to so many people that were there. And I don't know, I always have this in the back of my mind that someday somebody's going to be like, oh, well, why are you the one doing this?
Have you ever considered what will happen when people will find out that you're actually really bad at having imposter syndrome?
Oh, you're gonna give her another complex, Max. Come on.
So I've actually had authors. Well, one time I had an author who was like, "You always hate on everything I write," and I was like, "I was giving you a compliment, sir," on a Facebook group, and I was like, "Well, this is why I don't feel included."
Okay, I gotta remember, this is not my podcast. I'm not gonna go into a diatribe about stoicism now, but. Yeah, whenever someone says something like this about feeling excluded or imposter syndrome, and especially when people say really wild things that you don't understand, I've recently for the last couple of years really become to appreciate stoicism in these regards. And I think one of those old Greek dudes, he basically says, whenever I hear that someone is talking shit about me, to paraphrase, I say that they must not know me well, because there are so many worse things he could have said, right? Okay. So, people have their own slot machine in their head, their own little pinball machine, and if you put in a thought there and it bounces around and something weird comes out, that's not really your fault, as long as you're trying to be the best as you can. So
this isn't a constant thing. In the beginning, I was very if I reach out and somebody says no, what's the worst that's going to happen? They say no. And then over time, sometimes I'll try and engage with the community, and I'm just not very I'm not very dedicated to continuing to communicate with everybody all the time. I need breaks, and then I feel like I've lost a step, So it's really much more in my head, and I do know this, and sometimes it's much better than others. So,
what I found, you guys, is that the more people I interview, the more I feel like they're just people. Right. When we were first getting into this, it's easy to look at an author and be like, wow, and what they do is impressive. I don't want to take away from that, but they're still just people, right? They have families, they go on vacations, they have things that inspire them. They make up names to things that are copywritten already. Right? I mean, they're just people. And it's actually, the more I do this, the more I feel like, we can just have a conversation. Do you ever feel that way?
Also, I think it's super hard to feel some sort of lamp fever or anxiety or stage fright if you're talking to someone like Shortaloon, who's just the chillest dude ever, right?
Yeah. The thing is, they're all the chillest dudes, and and not just dudes, females too, of course. Dudes are
dude is a general term.
Exactly. Yeah. So, okay, let me ask you this. So we're talking about one side of the equation, right? Where there's these incredible people that we're talking about. Have either of you had any regrets for not having the courage to ask somebody to come on the podcast that you wanted to interview?
I don't have this problem with individuals. I will reach out to anybody, right? The problem that I find most distressing is my podcast at the beginning was very much LitRPG because that's all I was reading and listening to. Mm-hmm. And then I don't only want to do LitRPG. I love talking to science communicators, and I love talking to like, I don't know, weird authors that are kind of off the wall. So I feel like because my podcast was so focused in the beginning on LitRPG, it's lost kind of its traction. And that to me is more distressing than trying to reach out to someone. So like the regret that I have is that I didn't broaden my horizons at the beginning, you know? So I guess like the problem comes from like traditional publishing houses. If you don't have a certain number of views, if you don't have a certain number of followers, you just don't receive arcs anymore. And I don't have money to keep buying everything on my own all the time. So I have to be strategic in what I'm going to buy. And so like, that's what I mean. Like, I feel like I lost traction with some parts of, can I get access to this very easily or not?
I have never even thought about that. Right. Like, this is, because as I said, like for me, the podcast is a self-contained vehicle. I wanted to do something cool for the community. And I did. And to be quite frank, at this point, sometimes like I'm putting about $250 of my own money into this podcast every month because I'm hiring an editor, right? And I just don't have the time otherwise. So I'm really thinking about like, hey, can I sustain this for the long run? Because I've interviewed everyone I kind of want to interview. But there's more authors coming out with cool new books, but I just don't have the time to read all of them and fall in love with them. And
hey, hang on, I'm gonna stop you real quick, Max. Did you say you hire an editor?
Yeah.
Wow, that
a wonderful guy called Jamie of Big Bad Audio. I want to shout him out here because he has his own podcast coming out soon, and they are just the best, right? Like legit, great quality, and just gung ho about the stuff and very on time and super professional. Can highly recommend them.
Wow. I think if I had an editor, I would probably churn out like 4 times the amount of content.
Well, do you release a new podcast episode every week?
I do.
God damn it. My good argument.
All right. Well, let's move on. I think those were 2 tangent questions that I've asked you. Mm-hmm. So I could probably keep going, but I had sent you a list of the people that I've interviewed, and that's just because we share some similar interviews on our podcast. But I wanted to know most memorable moments on your podcast, and if you want to start with maybe the people that we've all kind of interviewed, or where there's some overlap. But then if you want to branch out, you've already mentioned some people that I haven't had on the podcast, and I think the listeners would love to hear that.
My favorite ones, like the Seth McDuffie and Jonathan McLean podcast, for sure, was just one of the best ones I've ever done. Because those 2 guys just radiated positivity, and I came out of this podcast feeling like I'd just gone through like a power hour with like Tony Robbins or whatever. It was like also super nice because I didn't know who Jonathan McLean was at the sort of podcast. I didn't Google people. Like it's part of the process. And so this guy comes on. And I'm like, he has like a really nice camera. And then he knows this. I'm not like, this is not me like bullshitting this or anything, but he starts making, before we start rolling, he starts making this like, what I call important person meeting a pleb, a talk. You know, like, hello, fellow human being. I am also a human being. Please don't be weird. Right? Because if you're that famous, everyone suddenly starts like acting super weird around you, and you need to like kind of like ease them into it. And every single person I've met who's on a certain like who regularly appears in media, like does this thing where they're like, yes, hello, I'm a human being. Are you cool? And I was like, why is he doing this? I played along, and we got along like a house on fire. It was awesome. And then afterwards, I Googled him. I was like, oh, he's done Hollywood movies. Yeah.
No, he totally has. Yeah. And he is he is like the most down to earth person. Like,
yeah, oh my God,
and he's not afraid to be vulnerable. You know what I mean? Like he gets emotional when you ask him things that he's emotional about. He brings up his wife. Like, he talks about, he is one of the most talented and down to earth people that I've met on my podcast.
But yeah, so, on that note, the other cool point that I had on the podcast was when Shirtloon live on air called Jason an SJW cuck. It was also pretty good.
Oh man, you gotta love it.
Shirt's great.
My funny Jonathan McLean story is that he writes
romance
novels, which I find fantastic and weird and funny. So really my most memorable moments are these like anecdotes. I remember Ryan Rimmel was talking about making a fart joke in his book. And he was like, yeah, it was kind of my wife's thing, but don't tell her I said that because she doesn't like that wouldn't be okay. And then one of the other things is a lot of these people have never been interviewed before, and so I feel honored that they said yes to be interviewed with me, but also I just find it so strange that they hadn't been interviewed before. So those are kind of the memorable moments, I guess.
Yeah. Can you think of anyone in particular who maybe like you were their first interviewer?
So Travis Baldry had done interviews for like his gaming company. But I was the first person to talk to him about his book that he wrote, and narrating. So that was really fun. And he actually, the day that we talked, he found out he got his Tor deal, and it was being republished. Nice. So, he was stoked. And then there's quite a few people that they hadn't been reached out to yet is all. So, yeah.
Well, Max, you've spent a lot of time interacting with folks from Royal Road. Do you oftentimes interact with people who have never been on a podcast before?
Majority. Yeah. So as big as it seems, this pond of ours, it is actually quite small. So I've started. I'm now a freelance agent also. So I've signed with the agency that represents Pirate Aber, Rhaegar, and I'm basically one half of them, but I'm freelance, so can't say that I'm a partner for legal reasons. But if you're looking at the deals that people like, Brandon Sanderson, Patrick Rothfuss, George R. R. Martin, the kind of like throughput that these people have, it's literally like 10 times the amount of Shirtloon. Right. So even like stuff like the Fourth Wing, which like broke all records, like as books, they sell vastly more. But interestingly, audiobooks completely LitRPG completely demolishes everything when it comes to audiobooks. Yeah. And again, this is probably because of the just like amazing talent that we somehow attracted with our silly little stories. But to answer your question, most of the people who come to my podcast have never been interviewed before, and I think that's way okay, and I like making them feel comfortable enough to talk about themselves.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go into the next question here, and this is about your own writing, right? We all have a background reading and listening. Some of us, Dakota, have studied, the classics. But have you gotten around to doing your own writing? Max, I know you have, so maybe we'll start with you.
Oh yeah, sure. I'm writing a little something called, it used to be called Torchbearer. Now it's called Genesis of the Sacred Machine. And it's a story about, a woman who gets isekai'd and who has it all, who gets it all. Like, she does a hero's journey. She becomes really powerful. She has like these amazing friends, which is something she never had in life before. and she really wants to like keep them, and there's a war, and she loses the war and all her friends die. And now what does she do? Right? Mm-hmm. So she's stuck in a world that she doesn't recognize, and now has to come to terms with her loss, which is something that doesn't go well on Royal Road at all, and also has been way too complicated for me to write as a first work, but I've done it. And so, yeah. Dakota, please take over.
So I haven't written anything the last couple of years. I've been mostly focused on either podcasting or just kind of setting my life up here in the Upper Peninsula. So I have written a lot of nonfiction, though. I have quite a few memoir pieces. One of the things that I have published is a Star Trek conversation about Star Trek Voyager and one of the characters on it. And mostly I just want to try and promote people that I really enjoy right now, you know? So I haven't been focusing on finishing anything, if that makes sense.
You know, there is, I feel like in my brain, there is a switch that flips, right? So there have been times I consume audiobooks, right? I don't really have time to read anymore. So I consume audiobooks, and there are times when I'm in writing mode that I can't let something else in my brain.
My problem is like I'll be reading all of these things and I'll have a million ideas and I can't finish the one that's in front of me because I'm too distracted, you know? So I have to put away reading and listening to audiobooks for a while to actually write something.
Right.
I don't. I have ritual. Every morning I wake up, I drink my breakfast. I'm doing a smoothie every morning that I prepare in the evening, and then I sit my ass in a chair and I write for as long as I can before something else whisks me away. Used to be really great when I didn't have work because I could just like literally just like I could write until 12, like remember I had to eat, do that, and then write until like 9 at night. I love that. It was amazing. But recently, like with all the distractions that are coming up, I can only write for about like 2 hours. But I still like to read and listen, but it sometimes feels like work because the brain is engaging in the same activities. So I'm finally listening to Cradle right now, right? So Travis completely knocks it out of the park. And Will Wright is no slouch either, right? So sometimes I have to like pause, even in a good story like that, like in a great story like that. I have to pause and think about what that inspires me to write, jot it down, and then continue listening. And that stresses you out at some point because I wanna just relax and like listen to a story again and get lost in it and not feel as though I should be writing. So that's my issue on that.
So that's exactly what happened after my MFA is I had been writing solidly for 3 years. And at the end, I was like, I just want to enjoy literature again. Yeah. So that's like the mode that I put myself in.
I don't know who it was on Facebook. They recommended something from another person that they had the idea from. And that was basically like a super simple and stupid idea. It's just a list of priorities, right? So there's like 10 million things that could be important, but the ones that we really think about are like in the top 5, right? And any given day, you can just shift those. So sometimes reading is priority number 1. Sometimes it is writing, or sometimes it is work, or your kids, or your spouse, or whatever. So that's okay. And I think there's very little benefit in feeling bad about the fact that you chose to do something else.
That's good. Well, yeah. So let's talk about what's going on in your lives right now.
You go first, Dakota.
So, I had a really bad bout of depression over the winter. So I had all these plans, and interviews set up, and I've actually had 3 interviews recorded. I just haven't edited them and put them out yet. So that's my task for this week, is to try and get them edited and scheduled. So I am trying to get back into the saddle of doing interviews and putting them up. So yeah.
For me, I almost feel a little bad saying it, but I'm actually doing quite right.
That's great.
Yeah. For like the longest time, I just, kind of ambled along in life, and it took me until like 33, until like, after that, like, little episode, where I actually, started like believing that my life is something I had like a vesh of control over. So, got medicated for the ADHD, which is amazing. And even before that, doing therapy and all that kind of stuff. Now it just feels as though I could be doing all these things that I always wanted to do, but never could finish. And that feels at the same time super great, but also really stressful because it's a lot. So what's going on in my life right now? So I have a full-time job. I'm doing the podcast still with the help of Jamie, who's amazing. But I still need to record, right? He can't do that for me. Right. Then I also I'm building a website that helps people self-publish. I think by the time this podcast is out, you might already be able to like go to it. It's called gopubyourself.xyz. And it's literally just all the resources you need to publish yourself. So narrators and editors can come there and put themselves up and just say, hey, we're open for business. Authors can go there and find these people. They can also upload their own little snippets and go like, hey, if anyone wants to read this, and approach me with a like proposal to collaborate, sure, we can do that too. Or editors, right? That's also possible. I will also have all the publishers on there, the indie publishers who can pitch themselves and go like, hey, if you don't want to self-pub, you can always talk to us, right? So that's that sort of stuff. And I also, I'm an agent now, right? So I represent Mechanimus, I represent Saving Throw, Host, and by extension, because I'm working with Drew Gilmore, who is an amazing person, I'm also helping out on deals, for example, for Pirate Abba, Rhaegar, Casual Farmer, Raven's Dagger, those sort of people. And that's exciting beyond words.
So you're doing a few things, just a few things.
But also very exhausting, yeah.
Wow. Wow, I think maybe I need to get on some ADHD meds. I can be that productive. I did have one more question for you, and that is, do you have any questions for me? But you can put your interviewer hats back on if you'd like.
Yeah, so I find it really fascinating that you are really historically and literary focused with Tolkien and all of these, like, what in my mind I consider scholarly things, and then you do this podcast, and what is the mode of those two things? Like, do you have to switch off to like be an interviewer, or do you find that what you've done in the past has helped?
Wow. I think it's just if you're comparing earlier seasons to the current season, is that what you mean?
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more of like, what mood am I in this year? I'm not sure I'm even answering your question, but I think it probably depends on what I'm into, what kind of mood I'm in at the time.
I got a question, and mine would be, did you ever like reach out to Stephen Colbert?
No, I haven't. I've reached out to some strange folks. Like not that Stephen Colbert is strange. I mean, I'm guessing you're wondering about this because he's a huge Tolkien fan. But like,
he is.
But like, I've reached I reached out to. When I write, there's a person that I listen to. His name is Ryope. He does piano music. And so like I reached out to him just to like just to say like thank you for like being an inspiration. I've reached out to Matt Berry from What We Do in the Shadows because I really wanted him to narrate some pieces for my book. Granted, I've never heard back from Matt Berry. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, he's fantastic. But no, I've never reached out to Colbert.
I think you should. By all accounts, he's very approachable.
Yeah.
But should is a bad word, right? So yeah. The other question is I kind of wanted to flip it a little bit back at you. So if people are coming to you from LitRPG and they're finding you from LitRPG, what's something that you think they should listen to in your earlier episodes?
Oof. Well, I think a lot of people like I right away. Dakota said something when we were messaging back and forth about her D&D group, and I was like, "Oh, this is my person right here." Like, So I think a lot of people that come from LitRPG are also gamers, and usually I don't recommend my first 3 seasons to people, at least the live play D&D portion of the first 3 seasons. The interviews are cool. Because, those were never really meant to be on a podcast. They're just us playing D&D. Right. But I think that there are pieces of that, especially if you're into Tolkien, that are really have taken a deep dive. Most people that even play D&D do not make it past like the first or second echelon of Tolkien lore, right? Like they probably watched the movies. They may have even read some of the books, but they've never read the Silmarillion, most of them. They've never gone into the Book of Lost Tales, right? Or the histories of Middle Earth. They've never read essays written by, these Tolkien scholars. It's kind of like the Marvel what ifs, right? In some cases, right? And so, some people may be really interested in that. Some people may be like, whoa, no, thank you. A lot of the LitRPG people probably, if they're my age, right, if they're in your 40s, you probably grew up on Dragonlance and Forgotten Realms, right? So season four is all about those people that wrote the Symbian novels, right? And there's probably 8 books that I based season 4 off of, the whole story. So, if you've ever read Forgotten Realms, not necessarily like R.A. Salvatore, but some of the lesser known authors, that may interest them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Totally. It's one of those very open questions again.
Yeah. I like it. Yeah.
One last question that I have is, people who've listened to a lot of LitRPG, what do you recommend to them? Because everybody always recommends, Dinneman and Uglin and I call him Dinnerman, just to.
We're enemies. He just doesn't know it yet.
You and Matt are enemies? Yeah.
Yes, that's I one-sided sworn enemies. Because he made me read his book and I enjoyed it, and then he broke my heart.
Oh, he broke your heart? What character did he kill off?
Which one didn't he kill off is the right question.
Yeah.
Yeah, he likes to murder people.
Yeah, and in his books too.
So what's funny is I was talking with Jeff on air, and I talked to him about one of my favorite voices that he does. And I was Neven was there too, and I love Carl, right? I love Carl from the Everyone Loves Large Chess series. And Jeff paused for a second because I didn't give him any context, and he was like, "Wait, which Carl?" I'm like, "Oh, okay, all right, yeah, no, it's the Demons R Us Carl."
There's also a moment because I told Jeff the same thing, right? I told Jeff the same thing where I said, Matt Dinneman, like he broke my heart because the book was just too gripping. It was too intense. And he was like, yeah, I'm quite sure that he will take this as a compliment. And knowing Matt Dinneman, he would.
I think when I talked to him, he said he likes to make people cry.
Yes. It was very on brand. So my favorite story about Matt Dinneman is one that Lorna Ryburn of Time is Wind Publishing and also of Monoct Loop fame told, and she went up to him on DragonCon, and she is a very, very sweet person, and she looked up to him and said, like, "But Matt, at the end, everything is going to go well, right?" And Matt just looks at her and goes like, and walks away.
Yeah. There's no easy way out of this book series. I'm caught up at this point, but to answer your question, entry point to LitRPG, it's going to be it's a very different landscape than it was when I started. There's just so many like really good lesser known people. And that's kind of the path I'm going down now, right? Like the people that came from Royal Road, but all the people we've talked about, all the Noobtown series, the good guys and the bad guys and the ugly guys and which will be coming out. The critical failures, everyone loves large chess. I mean, those series aren't for everybody. Right now my kids are listening to my kids got into the Scott Myers series, Spells 2.0. If you're familiar with those.
For a second, I thought you were going to say my kids really got into Everybody Loves Large Chess. I was like, okay.
No. So my kids, I try to find things. They're younger, so I try to find things that are mostly appropriate. My 13-year-old is a little like she can delve into other things, but then of course my 11-year-old's like, oh well, if she's listening to it, I want to listen to it. So they were doing some Scott Myers, the Spells 2.0 series, and now they're doing Noobtown. And the interesting thing about I don't know if you guys knew this, but so Eric Uglin wrote the Good Guys series, and then he wrote the Bad Guys series, or he's going back and forth, but the Good Guys series has lots of swears in him, and the Bad Guys series does not. Up until 2 books ago, right? And that was swears were introduced because Neil was trying to be like he used some footage from a Good Guys book in a Bad Guys book because it was they were at the same place, right? The characters, and he introduced some swears in the Bad Guys series. But if there are parents out there and they, there's a series if they have a 8, 9, 10-year-old that wants to get into LitRPG, the Bad Guys series is actually a really not a bad series for that if you can stand the violence.
Dakota Kraut too, he doesn't have any swearing, and usually it's minimal gore. So
yeah, as a European, it's always kind of interesting to me, the whole like swearing, non-swearing thing, because in Europe, like no one really gives a damn. But like quite the opposite. Everyone is like, yeah, like sex and swearing is super fine, but like violence, does it really have to be that violent? Right?
Yeah.
Like it's very interesting, the whole like cultural thing. But to put a cap on your question, if it is somebody who I know obviously doesn't mind any of those things, and I'm giving them the gold standard of LitRPG, it's the Carl series. For me, I think that series has everything. It has all the things that I love LitRPG for. It pokes fun at itself. It has pop culture references. It's funny, but it also has a heart. And to me, that is like the gold standard. Yes, I think if you're going for real, quote unquote, real LitRPG, then I think Hero Fights with Monsters and like Prominent Hunter and Defiance of the Fall, like these like long serials, because they are serials, right? Are a different flavor. Just as, for example, you can love The Blacklist, but you can also love yourself a Tom Clancy movie, right? But yeah, like definitely Dungeon Crawler Carl is, as much as I'm memeing on it, literally one of the best things I've ever read. It's really, really good.
Yeah, which is funny if you go from that to Kaiju Battlefield Surgeon.
Oh my god! Like people have been reading about that, but I can like. Okay, so again, a Denaman thing. Have you seen the new cover, right?
Yeah.
So I can just see Matt going like, no, design a good cover that, fits right in between the live, love, and laugh posters and the funny summer reads. Just put it in there.
I like the old covers. I'm going to be honest. I'd like the old covers better.
I told him as much. I was like, dude, the ones you designed were better. Yeah. Like, don't get me wrong, they're nice, but like his were better.
It's for us, they're better, yes. But okay, so putting on an agent hat, right? So you have to see what sells, and so many of these covers that we're having right now are very pulpy, which is a good thing for us because we want pulp. Like, you want to be part of the in-group. You want to be like, look at the book and go like, yeah, that's LitRPG, right? Which is why we're using a big pool, but still a pool of cover designers. But on the other hand, if you want to go like trad, you have to have a trad cover. Otherwise, people are going to look at it and go like, what is this thing? Right?
I mean, yeah, it definitely, yes, I totally get what you're saying. Yeah, it definitely had a particular look that might not appeal to the masses, but I loved them.
They're super good. Like the one for the 6th with has like Uzi Jesus on the cover. That's amazing.
Uzi Jesus, Raul. Yeah,
I do love that Travis Baldry fought to keep his cover artist as some of the covers. So I have one more story about Matt Dinneman that maybe you haven't heard yet. The story goes, and I haven't verified this yet, is that he overtook Meryl Streep on Audible. Yes, he did.
And
he did.
And he had his agent reach out to her and ask her if she wanted to read a character in the next book.
Yeah. Jeff says it's probably a go.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Matt.
Yeah.
He found out that he overtook Meryl Streep at Dragon Con. So he was already there partying, enjoying life, and then he overtakes Meryl Streep, and it was just like a throwdown,
We could talk forever, but I just wanted to say thank you for coming and chatting with me on all the stuff that we love. It's been a real pleasure to have you.
Yeah. Thank you for enduring me.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was fun.
Thank you for joining us down this LitRPG deep dive. Please consider giving us a review on Apple Podcasts and visit us over at longwinded.one, where you can see past episodes and find all of our socials, even our new Discord server. We hope you enjoy.